Greetings, traveler. You've found your way back to the Silver Quill Corner. I am Grayfen, the Story Keeper. Long ago, when I was but a house elf bound to an ancient wizarding family, I learned that stories carry more magic than even the strongest spells. When I was freed, I gathered those tales, whispers of Hogwarts, legends of witches and wizards, and dreams woven through the ages. Tonight, as the wind curls against the windows and the candles burn low, let us journey together into this tale. Hush now. The night is listening. Somewhere beyond the glitter of feasts and spells, before the legends had names, there was a girl who loved the quiet sound of turning pages. She didn't know it yet, but the smallest moments, the ones nobody noticed, would one day change the fate of magic itself. This is where her story begins. There lived two ordinary folk, both dentists, in a small brick house on a quiet London street where hedges stood straight and even the clouds seemed punctual. The front garden smelled faintly of mint and morning rain. Curtains were drawn at precisely the same hour each night. Everything had its place, polished, proper, predictable. And yet, magic found them, in the form of a girl with bright, thoughtful eyes, Hermione Granger. Lamps flickered when she laughed, pages turned when she dreamed. Her parents kept their worry quiet, hiding it behind proud smiles and scientific journals. Her mother charted incidents in a notebook. Her father checked light fixtures and wiring, but no graph could measure this kind of anomaly. One night, after a stormy dinner full of silence and sideways glances, Hermione looked up and said softly, "Don't worry, I'll learn how to stop it." And somehow, they believed her. Years passed, and the world only grew smaller for her. Children laughed at what they couldn't understand. Adults praised what they could never quite explain. So she retreated into the one place that always made sense: knowledge. Books steadied her heartbeat. Facts gave her something solid to stand on when she felt like falling through the cracks between worlds. Then, on the morning of her 11th birthday, an envelope appeared on the doormat. Thick parchment, green ink, sealed with scarlet wax. Miss H. Granger, 2nd bedroom, 27 Maple Street, London. Thick paper, emerald ink. Her name written as if the pen knew her personally. Her heart stopped, not because she understood it, but because a part of her always had. A second letter followed, and then a visit. That afternoon, a stern woman in emerald robes stepped out of the rain. Professor Minerva McGonagall. She smelled faintly of parchment and storms, and when she spoke, the air seemed to hum with certainty, carefully, about the statute of secrecy, about a school hidden from the ordinary eye, about wands and owls and a train you could not find by platform number alone. Hermione listened the way a dry garden listens to rain. So it was true. The list in her notebook was not a list of mistakes. It was a map. "You're a witch, Miss Granger." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The lamps dimmed, the clock ticked, and the Grangers' tidy little kitchen became a place out of myth. Her parents held their cups with both hands. They asked careful, practical questions. Would Hermione be safe? Would she still learn her maths? Could they visit? Some answers the witch gave plainly. Some she promised would make sense soon. Some she tucked away behind a small, withholding smile. That night, Hermione lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every odd moment of her life, every book that turned, every flower that bloomed, fell neatly into place like puzzle pieces. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was curious. A week later, on a bright morning that smelled of trains and wet stone, the brick wall behind the leaky cauldron folded open like a secret she'd always been meant to find. A brick wall folded itself open and a street sighed out of hiding. Diagon Alley. Diagon Alley breathed magic from every window, broomsticks gleaming, quills writing by themselves, owls blinking in rows. Her parents stared in awe. Hermione simply whispered, "I knew it." Hermione's heart did a careful, astonished thing. It seemed to expand without getting any bigger. A contradiction she would have liked to study. No one had dressed the road for visitors. It was not tidy like a brochure. It was alive, noisy, crowded, excited, cheerful, full of voices that knew where they were going. Owls blinked from their perches, feathers ruffled like evening cloaks. A barrel-staved shop promised self-stirring cauldrons. A window spilled parchment in rolls and swags. Somebody's hat chased itself down the cobbles and was scolded when caught. They went to Gringotts with a witch from the school. There were arrangements for muggle-born families, it turned out. The old place had seen everything. A goblin counted, another checked a list. Hermione tried not to stare at the lantern light moving over teeth sharper than any dental poster. Then came the books. Flourish and blots smelled like ink and dust and something faintly peppery, as if the words themselves had a spice. The stack they were meant to buy would have satisfied any child. Hermione added 3 more with a hopeful look, then 2 more with an apologetic one. Her parents surrendered in good order. Later, in Ollivander's, boxes slept in tall columns, each tied up with its own quiet promise. The old wand-maker peered at Hermione as though she were a riddle with a pleasing answer. The first wand fizzed and went sulky. The second made a small rain of gold, then sneezed, an unhappy sound for a piece of wood to make. The third felt warm in her hand, almost companionable, but the sparks came out crooked, as if the wand were left-handed and she was not. "Try this," the wand-maker murmured. "Vine wood, dragon heartstring, 10 3/4 inches, reasonably springy. The touch of it was like stepping onto a staircase that knows your foot before it lands. Light flickered at the tip, not a showy display, more like a spark finding its home." Hermione stood very still. It felt like the beginning of a very long sentence she had been trying to say. The wand-maker nodded, more to himself than to her. Vine wood for growth and twining thought. Dragon heartstring for stubborn courage. A match made, neatly, and without fuss. After that, the street seemed to lean toward her differently, as if Diagon Alley recognized her now, not as a visitor, but as one of its own. Hermione stepped out into the alley, clutching the wand as though it were part of her own bones. For once, the world didn't feel too big. It felt like it had been waiting for her all along. And so began the story of the girl who would one day teach even the brightest among us that courage and cleverness, when bound together, can outshine any spell. September began the way it always did in London. Grey skies, hurried footsteps, the smell of rain on stone. But at King's Cross Station, something impossible waited, a secret stitched between platforms 9 and 10. You couldn't see it. You had to believe it. Through the steam and chatter, a small girl with wild brown curls held tight to her parents' hands. They were kind, practical people, dentists, who believed in clean smiles and common sense. And yet, here they stood, about to send their daughter through a wall. They told her to write. She promised she would. Then she squared her shoulders and ran straight into magic. The red train swallowed her in a breath of steam and sound, iron and wonder, and the world she knew slipped quietly away. The corridor buzzed with nerves. Owls hooted from cages. Chocolate frogs leapt mid-air. Trunks clattered against knees. Hermione moved through it like a small, determined storm. A boy had lost his toad. Another, thin, pale, famous without meaning to be, looked startled by his own name, and one, freckled and frowning, was muttering over his wand, mangling a spell between bites of sweets and sandwich. Hermione corrected him before she even introduced herself. Gentle, certain, brisk. A shimmer. Broken glass mended. 3 pairs of eyes widened, and something wordless sparked to life. Curiosity, respect. A thread that would one day become unbreakable. Outside, the countryside slid past like a dream she'd been waiting to have. Fields, hedges, clouds drifting low enough to touch. She tried to seem calm, but inside her chest, her heart tapped like a clock in a storm. "You belong here," it whispered. "You belong." Night arrived soft and silver. Boats rocked on the lake beneath the stars. The castle rose from the mist like something ancient remembering how to breathe. Windows glowed gold in the dark. Voices echoed. Magic hummed through the air like a distant chord. Inside, candles floated in the great hall, 1,000 tiny suns reflecting in her eyes. Her name was called. The sorting hat slid over her curls, heavy with thought. Clever, yes. Brave, perhaps, and something fiercer still. The will to do what's right, even when it's hard. Gryffindor, it decided. Applause burst like thunder. Scarlet banners rippled overhead, and for the first time in her life, Hermione Granger felt seen. That night, she lay awake beneath velvet curtains. The castle breathed around her, the murmur of portraits, the sigh of pipes, the heartbeat of old stone. And as she closed her eyes, she thought, "This is where I begin." Days turned to parchment and ink. She studied like breathing, effortlessly, endlessly. Knowledge came easily, friendship did not. Whispers followed her through corridors. Too eager, too certain, too much. One wrong correction, one too clever answer, and laughter rippled behind her back. It stung more than she expected. That night, she hid in the bathroom, marble cold beneath her hands, candlelight trembling on the walls. Then, the tremor. The floor shivered. A roar, low and awful, rolled through the stone. The door burst open. A troll, massive, grey, stinking of damp caves, filled the doorway, club dragging, eyes dull and hungry. Hermione froze for a heartbeat, then moved. Harry shouted, trying to draw it back. Ron fumbled for a spell, his voice cracked, and Hermione guided him toward the right incantation. Light flared. The club wrenched upward and crashed down on its own wielder. Silence. Dust falling like snow. The troll collapsed in a heap of stone-colored flesh. 3 children stood, gasping. Hermione looked at the others, wild-eyed, alive. When the teachers came, she spoke first and took the blame. Loyalty. That night by the fire, their laughter came shaky, uncertain, but together. And so the trio took shape. Autumn returned. Hogwarts exhaled. Cool stone, wet parchment, rain-soaked air. Carriages rattled through the gates. Owls crossed the grey sky like ink strokes on paper. Hermione stepped off the train, already talking. Lists, timetables, theories spilling faster than steam. Ron's jumper still smelled faintly of smoke from a flying car. Harry looked skyward, amazed to simply be back. She looked at them both, smiled and scolded. They laughed through it anyway. For a moment, it felt like the year might stay bright. But brightness never lasts long at Hogwarts. Lessons began. Professor Lockhart's face beamed from every page, his robes louder than his lectures, his vanity bright enough to blind. He called her brilliant, exceptional. For one brief moment she glowed under it. Then she saw what shone behind his smile, not admiration, but ego polished to a mirror's edge. Whispers began, not in mouths, but in walls. A hiss beneath the stone, a chill that cut through laughter and parchment alike. Students froze mid-sentence. Books half closed themselves. Even torches flickered uneasily, as if something old had begun to wake. Hermione listened. Patterns, times, footsteps. If there were rules to this terror, she would find them. One night, the trio turned a corner, she stopped short. Words glistened red across the wall, a warning, slick and wet. A cat hung still beneath it, eyes glassy, fur stiff. Screams echoed, Peeves cackled, and Hermione stared, not in horror, but calculation. Dark magic left clues. She would follow them. The castle grew colder. Children whispered of monsters and airs. Hermione's candle burned longer than any other. Parchment piled high, notes, runes, half-finished plans. And then came the night she vanished. When they found her, she lay in the hospital wing, pale, frozen, unblinking. A mirror shard glinted in her hand. She had looked, just enough to see, and not enough to die. The cleverest witch of her age, saved by her own instinct. Her body still. Her mind, still working even in silence. They found her notes before they found her voice. Pages curled with ink and thought, a tangle of theories written in her tidy, relentless hand. And at the top, one word circled twice. Pipes. That single clue unraveled the mystery. Even frozen, Hermione Granger was thinking. Even silent, she was saving them. Through parchment and reason, her brilliance whispered the path that would lead two frightened boys into legend. When the serpent fell and the chamber closed, sunlight returned to the castle. Summer slipped away like ink in water. The castle slept, and so did its ghosts, but not her. Hermione spent the holidays half in sunlight, half in parchment. The world outside spoke of beaches and laughter. Hers spoke of study schedules and what-ifs. Sometimes she caught herself staring at the sky, wondering, what if she hadn't solved it? What if she hadn't woken? But she had. And when the train whistled once more, steam rising, trunks clattering, the year began again. Only this time the air felt different, sharper, heavier, as though the world itself had started measuring her in smaller seconds. The ride north was all chatter and sweets for most, but Hermione sat by the window, book open, thoughts distant. Ron snored softly. Harry watched the fields blur by, and Hermione made her lists, classes, professors, goals, rules, new beginnings, then the cold. Not the kind that bites, the kind that removes. Breath turned to mist, frost spread across the glass, and a cloaked figure passed the door, a Dementor, gliding, draining, hollowing. Harry collapsed. Hermione froze halfway to her wand. There was no spell for this, no logic, just terror, heavy, ancient, absolute. Hogwarts greeted them with thunder and rain, torches hissing, portraits hiding their faces. But Hermione found order in the chaos. Arithmancy, runes, divination, care of magical creatures. All of them, somehow. Harry noticed first. Ron complained second. "Are you using a time turner or something?" he joked. She smiled, small, secret, tired. He was right, she was. A gift, or perhaps a burden, from Professor McGonagall, signed in careful ministry ink, permission to defy the clock. At first it was exhilarating, a symbol of trust, an impossible timetable conquered by will alone. While others slept, she studied again, repeating the same hour until knowledge fit where exhaustion should have been. To the professors, she was exceptional. To her friends, she was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost made of diligence. Then the year darkened. Dementors patrolled the gates. The whispers about Sirius Black grew louder, colder. It was not enough to raise her hand anymore. Sometimes you had to raise your wand. And then came the night when the world folded. The truth of Sirius, the condemned hippogriff. The wrong man hunted for the right reason, and time itself, became the only way to make it right. Dumbledore's words, quiet and deliberate. 3 turns should, Miss Granger. The hourglass spun, the air thickened, the world rewound. And for the first time, Hermione wasn't following anyone's rules. She was rewriting them. Through doubled corridors and mirrored torches, she led Harry with calm, precise instinct. They hid behind trees, listened to echoes of their own voices, watched destiny repeat until it could finally be changed. When she raised her wand and sent the stones flying to free Buckbeak, it wasn't just cleverness, it was compassion with perfect aim. And when Sirius soared into the night, she understood something new, that rules, when followed blindly, can be another kind of prison. Sometimes the world must be rewritten by those brave enough to hold the pen. When dawn came, the time turner hung heavy around her neck, the year's weight caught in its glass, sleep lost, time doubled, choices made. She stood there, eyes bright with exhausted triumph, and felt not pride, but peace. For once, she didn't analyze the lesson, but she knew that courage could be gentle, that intelligence could save lives, that right and wrong were threads meant to be untangled by steady hands. That night, she learned the rarest magic of all, that time itself will listen to those who wield it with kindness. And yet, beyond the towers, the wind was changing. Not in secret chambers, but in names whispered again, and dreams where fire began to breathe once more. The world was turning toward storm. When time was set right, and the clocks once more obeyed their keepers, Hermione Granger stepped into a new year. The world beyond the castle walls was darkening. Whispers moved like drafts beneath doors, names best left unspoken. But within Hogwarts, autumn still burned gold. Leaves drifted like sparks across the lake, and banners of the Triwizard Tournament unfurled, brilliant, proud, and faintly menacing. It began, as most revolutions do, with something small, sheets folding themselves, plates scrubbing clean with no hands in sight, invisible labor, unseen, unquestioned. Hermione noticed, she always noticed, when she learned of the house elves toiling below, scrubbing, mending, serving, and thanked by no one. She didn't just frown, she acted. Late at night, by candlelight, she stitched badges with pricked fingers, each one marked SPEW, a name too long for her sleeve, but too true to shorten. Freedom, she said softly, shouldn't need permission. They laughed. They rolled their eyes. Ron muttered. Harry hesitated. But Hermione's courage had never needed an audience. Her kind of fire burned slow, quiet as devotion, unyielding as truth. When the goblet of fire flared blue and spat out a fourth name, Harry Potter, the hall gasped. Accusations flew like sparks, but Hermione didn't flinch. She didn't need proof. She knew him. Through every cold breakfast, every whispered rumor, every icy silence between friends, she stayed. While Ron turned away, Hermione stayed. Logic in her bones, loyalty in her blood. In storms, even heroes need a compass. She was theirs. Winter came dressed in silver. The castle glowed beneath snow and candlelight. For once, Hermione hesitated before the mirror, curl by curl, ribbon by ribbon. She was not preparing for a test, but for the Yule Ball. Victor Crumb, seeker, champion, quiet-eyed admirer, had asked for her hand. Not for spectacle, not for fame, but because she intrigued him. At first, she thought it a misunderstanding. Surely he meant someone else, someone softer, someone simpler. But his eyes were set on Hermione. When she entered the great hall, snow drifted from the enchanted ceiling, music poised mid-breath, and for one moment every eye turned. Not because of the dress, because she glowed, because she finally allowed herself to be seen. She laughed, she danced, and for one night, Hermione Granger, the girl who knew every answer, was simply a girl who felt beautiful. Ron's jealousy came after, clumsy, sharp-edged, and too late, and though it hurt, she didn't let it define her, because that night wasn't about him. It was about her, learning that affection can arrive uninvited and that being clever doesn't protect the heart. She worked through it the only way she knew, pen to parchment, logic over longing. And still, sometimes, her eyes betrayed her, seeking him in laughter she pretended not to hear. When the second task came, she stood at the lake's edge, watching Victor dive beneath black water. For a moment, her breath caught, not from fear, but from the quiet understanding that being admired and being understood were not the same thing. By spring, the frost melted. The tasks grew darker, dragons, mazes, and the echo of screams. Hermione's mind never stopped mapping every danger, every spell, every outcome. Harry faced the flames. In her plans, her sleepless worry, her whispered, "You can do this." And when Cedric Diggory fell, and the Great Hall fell silent, Hermione didn't cry where others could see. She folded her trembling hands and understood. The world beyond schoolbooks was no longer safe. That summer, letters came slower, news came twisted. When Hermione returned to Hogwarts, it no longer felt like coming home. It felt like taking position. The air was heavy, watchful, waiting. The Ministry's reach had found the castle, wrapped in pink wool and poisoned perfume. Dolores Umbridge, a smile too sweet, a classroom stripped of magic. No spells, no questions, only ink and obedience. Most fumed in silence. Harry raged, Ron muttered, but Hermione planned. In the quiet corners of parchment and thought, a question sparked. What if we taught ourselves? What if we didn't wait for permission? And so, beneath the castle's whispering rafters, she conjured a rebellion. Dumbledore's army. She named it. She forged the enchanted coins, every detail, precise, hidden, unbreakable. While others dreamed of fighting back, Hermione Granger built the blueprints of resistance. She no longer raised her hand for answers. She taught them. Charms flared against stone. Spells rose like hymns, and for a time, hope itself became a subject worth studying. But rebellion draws eyes. Umbridge watched. Detentions deepened. Students returned with words carved in red. Hermione saw them, and something scarred quietly inside her too. Still, she did not stop, even when sleep thinned to parchment, even when courage trembled. Her bravery was deliberate, the kind that does not need to shout. At night, by candlelight, she drafted plans on scraps of parchment, ways to protect, to warn, to endure. Some rebellions roar, others whisper, but never mistake her silence for surrender. It was there, in the hum between heartbeats, that Hermione Granger became the kind of witch tyrants should fear. The castle did not sleep that spring. Rumors fluttered through corridors. Dumbledore gone, the Ministry closing in, the world outside tightening its fist. Still, the DA met. Even when fear walked the halls, Hermione lit her candle and whispered, "Again." Every lesson was a promise. That knowledge could still be power, and courage could still be taught. Then came the night when lessons weren't enough. That night, a cry for help arrived that was not written but seen in Harry's mind. A vision, fierce and desperate, Sirius Black, trapped, tortured, in the bowels of the Ministry. Hermione hesitated, reason warring with faith. Her heart said, "Follow him." Her mind whispered, "It's a trap." But when Harry's voice broke, certain, terrified, she chose the only thing she ever truly trusted, her friends. And so 6 of them went, children against prophecy, armed with courage and the half-learned spells of a secret classroom. The Department of Mysteries was not made for children. Its corridors whispered secrets too old for ears so young. Shelves of glass and shadow, magic that felt alive and angry. She fought the way she thought, precise, deliberate, no wasted motion. She shielded first, healed second, and never once looked away. Then came the curse that struck true, Death Eater, Dolohov's violet flame. It hit her square in the chest. Hermione fell to the ground. For a moment, the room went still without her voice. When she came to, days later, it was in the white hush of St. Mungo's Hospital. Harry and Ron told her what she'd missed. The fight, the loss, the veil that took Sirius black. The world had shifted. The Ministry, at last, believed. But the victory felt hollow. Truth bought at too high a cost. She sat upright, weak but unyielding, and whispered to no one, "We were right." It wasn't pride. It was grief wrapped in certainty. Because being right had never hurt so much. That summer, letters grew darker. Headlines screamed louder. And the golden light of childhood faded into something colder, harder, a dawn forged of iron. Yet through it all, Hermione wrote. She planned. She gathered what was left of hope and held it like a lantern. Knowledge made her powerful. Pain made her wise. And as the old world cracked and fell to shadow, Hermione Granger learned the oldest magic of all, to keep her heart kind when everything else demanded she turn it to stone. Summer did not heal what the Ministry broke. Letters came slower. News arrived warped, as though truth itself had been folded too many times. When Hermione crossed the castle threshold again, it no longer felt like coming home. It felt like taking position. A hush lived in the corridors. Not silence, vigilance. Portraits leaned forward, candles burned lower, conserving light for a longer darkness. And Hermione did what she always did. She made lists, timetables, contingencies tucked into the margins like small, careful prayers. Professor Slughorn returned, polished and plump, with a talent for collecting talents. She joined his gatherings, not for the sugared pineapple or the flattery, but to listen, to learn who the world was grooming and who was being quietly used. Her mind became an index again. Names, alliances, possibilities. Then came potions, a new professor, a new book, Harry's battered copy, the Half-Blood Princes, its margins crowded with answers that weren't in any edition she'd ever read. Potions that once fumed now turned clear as glass under his hand. Hermione's, precise and perfect by the text, looked suddenly like obedience instead of mastery. She smiled for her friend, but inside something tightened. Because brilliance without ethics is only power dressed in ink. She researched, checked publishing dates, dragged reference books until the library itself seemed to sigh. Who wrote it didn't matter, she realized. The question was, what kind of mind rewrites rules and never questions why? Autumn passed with lessons and small heartbreaks. And Ron. It was never just about homework. It was the laughter, the chess games unfinished, the near touch of hands reaching for the same quill. Then Lavender's laughter, bright, sharp, deliberate. Ron stepped into it, and Hermione learned the shape of hurt that doesn't break you, but teaches you where your heart is. She conjured golden birds to steady her hands. When pain flared, they burst into stormlight. Afterward, she only whispered, control, not concealment. Tenderness tempered like steel. Darkness edged closer. Katie Bell, cursed by a necklace she never meant to touch. Ron, poisoned by wine meant for another. In the hospital wing, Hermione sat straighter than sleep allowed, her fingers white around his hand, watching for color to return. Fear didn't undo her. It refined her. Each danger catalogued, each clue mapped. Her logic turned toward war. She mastered apparition, clean, exact, unflinching, moved from one ring to the next without error. Harry was too young, Ron 1 inch short of success. Still, Harry chased whispers, Draco's name like a ghost between classes. Hermione doubted, measured, reasoned, and later she would wish she hadn't. Because the year would prove that even logic can be too slow for fate. Then came the night everything shifted. A tower, a spell spoken without mercy, a light extinguished that no wand could rekindle. The castle flinched, candles faltered, somewhere a phoenix began to sing. At the funeral by the lake, lilies floated like small moons. Hermione didn't hide her tears. Her hand found Harry's sleeve, then Ron's. No words, only the sound of water and loss. Dumbledore had been the map, the compass she measured her cleverness against, the proof that wisdom and kindness could share the same skin. Without him, the world looked wider, colder, unmarked. So she made sense of loss the only way she knew how. Plans, lists. She gathered books, not to study, but to prepare. For war, for truth, for what was coming. She thought of the man who scribbled brilliance without conscience, the boy who broke her heart without meaning to, and the one who carried the fate of them all. She couldn't promise safety, but she could promise readiness, knowledge, bound to survival, love, disguised as study. If the headmaster could fall, she reasoned, then Hogwarts was no longer sanctuary. It was a fortress waiting to be breached. If Voldemort had returned in full, then every law, every safety, every truth they'd trusted was already obsolete. She studied spells for concealment. She memorized the rules of ancient protection magic. And in the quiet hours before dawn, she began building the framework of something no one had yet named, a mission without a map. She didn't tell Harry yet, or Ron. But that night, Hermione decided that when the world demanded its next plan, she would already have it. She prepared what to carry into the storm. At the bottom, she added one final line, never spoken aloud. Go where Harry goes. She folded it into her beaded bag, its inside larger than its outside, as all brave hearts must be. Even the brightest minds must pass through a year when cleverness is not enough. This was hers, where knowledge found its conscience and love learned its strength. The night deepens, thunder waits beyond the hills, and somewhere, beneath that gathering storm, Hermione Granger sharpens her light for the dark to come. The house was quiet. Photographs faced the wrong futures. Hermione stood behind the sofa, wand steady, breath not. The spell gathered softly on her tongue. Not to harm, to protect. A whisper, a flash. Two good people, dentists, kind and ordinary, forgot the danger, forgot the daughter, and remembered a new life beneath foreign sun. Her name vanished from their hearts without pain, because she willed it so. And then she walked into a war. The burrow smelled of bread, of smoke, of borrowed time. Plans murmured over teacups. A wedding bell rang, bright as hope, and shattered in the same breath. Then came flight, dark skies, rain in the stones, 3 against everything. They hid by thinking, moved by listening, survived by Hermione's maps, her wards, her unyielding mind. Grimmauld Place opened to them like a secret remembered. She sealed it with spells until the walls hummed with her protection. In lamplight, they hunted meaning through bloodlines and half-truths. The locket whispered lies, her patience whispered louder. She made tea no one drank, read until her eyes burned, planned until planning hurt. Winter came, forests, frost, silence. A tent that remembered warmth. Her lists kept them alive, her will kept them human. When Ron left, the hollow he left behind was larger than the tent itself. She did not cry where Harry could see. She simply kept watch. Godric's hollow waited with gravestones and ghosts, a trap in an old woman's face. They escaped, barely, and she healed Harry's torn skin with steady hands that shook only after he slept. Then, moonlight on frozen water, a silver glow. Ron returned, pulling a sword from Winter's throat. The locket broke open, spilling venom and memory. She stood very still and let the truth be louder than the lies. At Shell Cottage, she mended what she could. Then, back to the hunt. A visit to Xenophilius Lovegood's tower of ink and print became a trap that smelled of despair. From there, cellars, ropes, the cruel laughter of Bellatrix Lestrange. Hermione endured. Every question was a blade, every silence resistance. She gave them nothing that would end him. When freedom came, it rode on Dobby's courage and cost his life. On that beach she wept, salt on salt, and promised that his name would be remembered. She slept by the sea, then woke with purpose. At Gringotts she wore another's face, rode a dragon through fire, and laughed into the wind. Ash tangled in her hair. Triumph burned in her chest. One more piece fallen. The castle called them home. The room of requirement trembled with returning footsteps. Friends gathered like constellations, finding their shape again. Below the castle, the air was damp and close, smelling of stone, salt, and secrets. The serpent door loomed before them, cold and waiting. Hermione hesitated. "How will we open it without Harry?" Ron leaned in, voice low, and hissed. Not words, sounds, a perfect mimicry remembered from years of standing beside a parcel mouth. The stone split open. The chamber breathed again. Hermione stared, half in disbelief, half in admiration. Trust Ron Weasley to surprise her when the world was burning. They moved among the bones of the basilisk, pale as moonlight. She knelt, lifted a fang, and drove it through the golden cup. A scream ripped the air. Then silence. When it was done, she turned, and he was already looking at her. There were no plans left to make, no words to polish, only a kiss, fierce, startled, inevitable. Above them, Hogwarts shook. The war had reached its heart. She went below, into the chamber itself, and spoke to stone in the language of courage. Fangs bright as justice, a cup shattered into harmlessness. The war that had whispered for years finally found its voice. Flames climbed the staircases. Stone cracked like thunder. Portraits screamed warnings while ghosts fled through the walls. Hermione moved through it all, precise, unflinching, deliberate. Shield charms burst from her wand like pulses of light. She healed where she could, carried who she must, and when she saw fear in another's eyes, she lent them her steadiness. Somewhere in the chaos, the great halls split with battle. Spells collided, red, green, gold, a storm made of magic and grief. Together, her and Ron fought back to back, the way they always had, their movements learned from years of friendship and fire. And when the snake fell, when the walls shook with the final reckoning, Hermione did not hesitate. She followed Harry to the heart of it, to that quiet office where the truth waited in glass and memory. She watched as Snape's story spilled out. Love turned weapon, guilt turned vow. It changed nothing and everything. She understood. Then came silence. The last jewel blazed at the heart of the hall. Voldemort's voice, cold, desperate, met Harry's calm defiance. And then the spell rebounded, silent first, then thunderous. Light filled every corner, the wand fell, the war broke. The sound that followed was not a cheer, it was an exhale, the kind that empties years of fear all at once. Hermione stood motionless, her wand still raised, waiting for the echo to fade before she allowed herself to believe it. The Dark Lord, gone. The castle, scarred but standing. Her friends, alive. She sank to her knees. Tears fell, not from grief this time, but from the sheer exhaustion of hope fulfilled. Later, she helped the wounded. She found Luna humming to the air, Neville holding his ground, and thought, "This is what rebuilding looks like." When she finally stepped into the dawn, the light over the lake was quiet and clean. She took Ron's hand, then Harry's. 3 silhouettes, side by side, not heroes, just survivors who had refused to stop fighting. And in that stillness, Hermione made herself a silent promise to remember, to restore, to never let the world forget what they'd lost, nor what they'd saved. Weeks later, in a sun-bright country far from war, a bell over a shop door rang. Small, mortal, perfect. 2 familiar faces turned toward her, smiling, safe. She whispered the counter-charm, and the memories came flooding back. There were tears, hers, theirs, and tea and laughter, and 1,000 small explanations that all meant one thing: I chose you every time. She won the war without hunger for glory. Her triumph was quieter, a mind that stayed kind, a heart that stayed human. The world rebuilt itself around her wisdom. And so ends the tale of Hermione Granger, the girl who read the world until it made sense and then taught it to be better.